Hi, everybody. Welcome to another HOSS Talks FOSS. I'm the HOSS, head of open source strategy here at Percona, Matt Yakovit. And today I'm here with Vaidy from Flipkart, who is one of India's largest e-commerce sites. And they have one of the largest e-commerce MySQL deployments in the world. And I'm really excited to have him here today to chat with us a little bit about his journey and about the stuff going on at Flipkart. How are you today, Vaidy?
I'm doing great. How about you, Matt?
I'm doing wonderful as well. You know, it is Tuesday. I wish it was Friday, but it's not. So I'm going to have to just deal with the Tuesdays. So it happens. It happens, right? Vaidy, I've been in the open source space, and I started in the MySQL space. So MySQL always has that special place in my heart. I originally started as an Oracle DBA, though, and moved to MySQL later on. Now, I'm curious, how did you get started in the MySQL side of things? Way back in the day. What was your career journey like? Where did you start?
Well, I think if you look at MySQL, it's probably one of the oldest softwares out there and absolutely rock solid softwares, right? And I think for a very long time, one could basically just say that if it is a database, it is MySQL, right? I mean, before all of the other new age kids came to the block, right? Like the NoSQL and stuff like that, it was always MySQL, which did most of the heavy lifting, I would say. So I have been in this industry for about 12 to 13 odd years. And I'm proud to say that I think my first database was Percona, and it's still, continuing to be MySQL Percona flavor for that matter, right? It just talks about how good the product is.
Well, that's good. That's good. And so did you start like coming out of college as a developer, or did you start on the operations side? Did you start like sysadmin? Where did that, the kind of the transfer from, getting into that database space, what did that look like?
Well, I think so. I have never been a sysadmin or a DBA of sort ever in my life. I'm still not a DBA of sort, right? But I started as a engineer, and for the first 12 years of my career, I have been an IC, independent contributor, and it just from the past 2 years of sort, I've been managing teams over here in Flipkart. But yeah, I've been mostly in the developer engineer space, I would say.
Awesome. Okay, so you've been working with MySQL and you've been deploying, and now at Flipkart, I'm interested. Do they have a dedicated DBA team, or do the engineering team, the developers, actually manage that environment?
I mean, it's a very good question, right? I think this is how Flipkart was before the product that we built sort of came into picture. Every team used to maintain their own MySQL databases, and things just to get very, very difficult, I would say, because not everyone knows the intricacies of Percona, or let's even say, not everyone is a subject matter expertise on MySQL, and it always used to get very tough having people having people in the team. So every team had to do this basically, right? And because it is still, in fact, Flipkart, in fact, has 2 data centers and a new data center also coming up. And we are not on the cloud where we can directly. So we have a private cloud, and there are very good reasons, monetary reasons, I would say, why we still use the private cloud. There's no on-prem solution in a way, right? Like of having a well-managed, well-oiled MySQL cluster of sort, and that is where somewhere this whole journey of creating this whole managed MySQL sort of began, after looking at all of these problems, I would say.
Okay. And so you had a lot of different teams, each had their own deployments, each managed them differently. Were you part of the process of trying to bring them and consolidate them a bit and that control? Because that had to have been, challenging, just because if everyone's doing things a little different, how do you get them all to conform? That had to be a pretty big challenge.
I'll probably take that question. I'll give you a little bit deeper context over there, right? I think see, coming from Flipkart is typically it's a e-commerce company, and it is India's largest e-commerce company, right? And we have about 125 million users across India, and managing all of this implies there are a lot of microservices across the entire logistics, supply chain, and all of that, right? And typically, this whole e-commerce business, logistics, supply chain is very transactional in nature, and that basically means MySQL again, because it is the hero of transactional data of sort, right? So when I was part of teams where we were using MySQL for doing in supply chain side of things, right? Eventually, I started also going into, the scale is the problem everywhere, right? So I was managing a team which was managing Vitess. Vitess is the planet scale open version, open source version. That was when we also as a team we contributed back to Vitess as well, when it was not planet scale. I mean, right?
Yes. That was before planet scale. I mean, Vitess was created at YouTube originally, and then open sourced, and it's been out there for several years now. But yeah.
So it was around that time I started developing this expertise, and people also started associating me with some of these things. And it was around this time I started this project in the supply chain side of things, saying I want to build a managed MySQL which can solve a lot of these problems of sort. And then what I did was I actually I moved into the platform side of world, where I knew it would be funded of sort by the company as well. Instead of working on supply chain problems, I actually started working more on this specific product for our in on-prem cloud of sort, right? And as you said, the journey was never easy of sort, right? Like, so you build it, and then it's always a very difficult task getting your first few customers of sort, right? So what we did was we actually poached somebody from some of these accounting, some of these teams which were heavy on MySQL, for example, the accounting teams and things like that, right? We actually poached their MySQL DB onto our team, and then we just told the team that this guy will take care of your entire stack of sort. You don't need to worry. We'll ensure that your MySQL uptime is healthy of sort. But behind the scenes, we started completely managing it behind the scenes, and that's basically where it sort of started from.
Okay, and now you have this platform. Yeah. That's it's a database as a service basically, but just for the internal Flipkart teams, right? So you're enabling them to add their own databases, their own resources, and everything else, right? Oh, excellent. That's awesome. And, I saw in the description of a talk that you have coming up at Percona Live, that, you're at 600 clusters, 1,600 VMs, and over a petabyte of data. It's a lot. I'm in all in the MySQL space. So one of the challenges that I've seen in this current environment is, and I'm curious if you've experienced this, when you're working with those development teams, a lot of times they don't have that MySQL expertise. So they build code or they design applications that might not be 100% optimized to take advantage of the MySQL infrastructure. So is that something that you run into where, you have to do some coaching, or you've got some best practices for your developers to get the most out of MySQL?
Yeah, I think as part of platform teams, we call it Funda. Funda is basically the philosophy, right? In very Indian terms, it's called Funda, right? The philosophy is basically it is core versus context, right? So this is what we talk about as a platform. We would want other teams to focus on their core and not on the context, right? So they have to focus on their supply chain logistics and those kind of business functions, and leave the database aside completely, so that we completely manage it. And that's been basically the core of this whole exercise of sort. Did I answer your question? May not be.
Yeah. So, maybe another take on this a little different. Like, so, you're responsible for making sure that the database is taken care of. But Are there challenges that pop up from the development teams or the different business units that you have to deal with quite a bit? I mean, I know in my experience, there's always the performance, there's always the architecture of the schemas, things like that tend to be sometimes questionable, and they cause more issues than the infrastructure in a lot of cases.
I get your point. I think we have tried to build this just like a startup, right? Like to be very fair, the culture is very startupish, right? So what did we do? We said that there are not going to be any roadblocks initially. Initially we were doing a lot of roadblocking, right? Saying, why do you need this size of instance? Why do you need so many cores? Why do you need so much memory? Please go and get your footprint of last year, how your QPS was, and all of that stuff. But then we started realizing that people weren't onboarding. They felt that this team isn't very friendly enough to onboard. So that's when we said, now is the time for adoption. So we remove all the barriers and say, just get whatever you want. You just get it on the table first. We'll support whatever it takes. I think that was the first thing that we did. We brought everyone. We said that there are no barriers. It's completely no barriers. You can just get your MySQL. We'll start managing it for you. You don't need to worry about a lot of these things. Additionally, what we also said, we said that we have a pool of DBAs also here, and we will basically help you with your optimizing some of your stuff. The system also, what it did is we exposed only some of the variables and not all of the variables. Variables which are simpler to understand were shown to the user. Variables which are slightly harder to configure, like some of the memory parameters which people don't have a great idea about, we abstracted that away from the user and say, you just work with these few variables which are well understood, right? If you need anything more, we'll help you out. So that was, I think, the roadblock of sort which we were able to help teams with, because of which they started onboarding onto us. And our philosophy has always been that you should not need a SME in every team, right? If you have a SME in every team, then the purpose is not being solved really. So so we have tried to help in whatever ways possible so that people onboard to the platform.
Okay, that makes sense. And so as people add, their own applications, you mentioned you have clustering. What sort of clustering are you using right now? What technology for that?
I think it's a standard replication, right? The two kinds of replication that is possible today, the Winlog-based replication or the GKID-based replication. We offer both the flavors, right? And people can basically create their own cluster of sort, right? Whatever topology they want to create, can go ahead and create. We are not offering a multi-master yet. That is in the works, right? But it's still a single master of sort. But we do offer multi-cloud solutions, multi-region solutions, and stuff like topology, which goes across multiple regions and stuff like that. So
okay, and are you using like some tool for automated failover, like Orchestrator or your own custom scripts?
Well, good question, I think, right? Like, so during the time when we started building this piece out, right, the orchestrator, GitHub's orchestrator, the OpenArc orchestrator, I think, which you're talking about, it didn't really fit in with our use case of sort, right? Especially given the fact that ours is more of a on-prem cloud, which has its own, complexities involved, which is not really, you can't just take it on, put it on AWS or a GCP directly, right? Like this is the on-prem solution. So so we felt that there was the whole it was not matching well or fitting well with our sort of situation, and that's when we sort of built our entire own orchestrator of sort, orchestrator monitoring framework, and all of that was built from scratch here. So it's completely built in Flipkart.
Okay. Okay, and you mentioned you're using virtual machines, so like some people now are starting to explore using containers for the database as a service, but you decided to stick with the virtual side.
So as a company, from the last I would say one and a half years, we are pivoting completely towards the Kubernetes side of things, right? Before that, we were mainly on the VM world of sort, including very large bare metals and stuff like that, right? So this effort of making this whole the product is called Altair, by the way. I didn't mention that. So porting Altair to ensure that it also starts supporting, becomes a operator of sort, and in fact, that is also one of the things that we would like to open source it outside once we actually make it compatible with at least a single cloud.
Yeah, because that would be great. I mean, I think that so many people are looking to Kubernetes to be an easy way of managing the mass of systems and the mass of services. It makes sense to kind of fit in the database side, and we're seeing growth there as well. So we have our operators for Percona's products, so we're seeing growth there. And it's interesting that you're starting to move from the VM side to the Kubernetes side. We're seeing so many companies do that because a lot of the applications are being deployed with Kubernetes as well. So I'm guessing a lot of the applications that you support from the database standpoint are already cloud native. They're already deployed via Kubernetes. They're already deployed in that microservice world.
That's right. I think even in Flipkart, if you look at it. We have first started with the stateless migration, mostly the stateless migration of applications which are don't have a state associated with it. First, they move to Kubernetes, followed up with the stateful side of things, because stateful side of things naturally brings its own complexities with it. Right, it's not going to be a straightforward thing. You have to think of a lot of things, including how you're going to back up your data and everything, especially if it's an on-prem cloud, right? You have to build some of these things yourself, because not all products out there are completely compatible with any kind of on-prem cloud, right? You can't just take a software today and put it out there. Not everything will directly work, and many of them are not even compatible of. So that's mainly the challenge of sort.
Oh yeah, definitely. And what's interesting is I think some of the tooling and some of these changes are driven by just the size of environments that are growing so rapidly. Now, I know, you had mentioned about 1,600, instances or VMs running, but I'm guessing that's grown substantially over the last few years. And I mean,
growing number, it's a continuously growing number, right? Every day we have onboardings, and every other day people want to expand their cluster, and so it keeps expanding every other day. So.
Well, we do a regular survey, and it was interesting. 2 years ago, the number of people who responded to our survey that had more than 100 instances running was about 20% of the overall population. I think it was 800 people responded or something like that. This past year, it jumped to 40%. So it went from 20% to 40 for more than 100, and for more than 1,000, it went from like 11 to 20%. So, I mean, like in 1 year, right? So that's a pretty significant spike. And I think it's driven by everyone wants their own applications. There's more of these platform requirements where you need each individual system to be managed, and everybody wants their own. So you need these platforms built internally, or adopt a cloud platform where you can automatically empower those developers to move fast. Because when I started, I mean, to build a database system and to build a database setup, it could be a couple days. It'd be like, you set up okay, in a week I'll get back to you with the instance. No, you need that like within like minutes, right? And I think that has completely changed the paradigm of everything that we've been doing in the tech space, is that move fast, get things now. Nobody wants to wait, and nobody can afford to wait.
Absolutely. That makes sense. Absolutely makes sense.
So I'm curious, like this big deployment, you're deploying this platform. What were, maybe highlight a couple of the interesting things that you learned during this journey. Maybe there was one or two things that you're like, "Oh, I didn't know that was going to happen," or that was much weirder than I thought it would be. Are there a couple of those that you might be able to share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe I can share two instances probably.
Okay, sure, no problem.
Right. At least I didn't know about it, and we sort of figured it out. Maybe this is specific to MySQL as well, right? So in MySQL, we started in a typical master multi-slave architecture of sort, right? Eventually, as people started using their data stores of sort, somewhere down the line, we started seeing that everyone is sort of reporting higher disk usage on the slave. So we keep debugging, finding out, why, what exactly, and there's no clear answer of sort, and it would organically just keep happening. You keep trimming it down, you keep optimizing data. Again, after some time, it sort of increases. And we did a good amount of, experiments of sort to figure out what kind of schemas or what kind of query patterns or what kind of data is actually causing this. And we did round about to some sort of rough sort of idea that these are the kind of schemas which are causing some of these this ever increasing disk divergence is what we're calling, right? And then finally we got so frustrated that it's got to be something. So we asked Percona also on the open source community, expecting to get some answer, but then the answer that we got there was, yes, this is expected, and there is no other way except rebuild the node completely. So that way we were sort of happy that we did our due diligence, and then eventually figured out that actually is the problem, and there's no way around it also. And so today we have a automated way of the slaves also keep rebuilding every time the difference between master and slave, if it crosses a certain percentage for the same amount of data, if there is more than say 10% increase in size, then we automatically start rebuilding it off sorts. So that is something we have started doing.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is like the maybe the changes in the system left some empty space, they left some junk out there, and they just need to be cleaned up regularly.
In some way, but it's always been that master is low and slave is high. We have seen maybe 5% of the use cases where the slave was less and the master was higher. That also we have seen, but we weren't able to figure out why that happens. But this is something which happens. Maybe I can share one more very interesting incident or thing we have seen, and these are things that you can only experience in a on-prem solution, right? Because people will not be exposed to a lot of these things if they are using the cloud services or something. So there's this case where you try to so their maintenance is happening all the time on the private cloud, right? Like on-prem cloud, there are TORs, there are racks, there are motherships, and things like that. So we understand a lot of those constructs in the application. Whenever there is a network, a switch or a TOR which is getting rebooted or something, our application basically detects that the database server is no longer available immediately, and then does a failover to the hot standby, and the hot standby comes up, and the applications are continuously writing. They don't even face a downtime because we are also using a DNS in this case. So typically they keep writing. And then what happens is once the network TOR or something is back from maintenance, the old master, which was supposed to have been taken down, that also starts taking writes. You have a split write, you have a split brain problem. These are some of the things I think were very interesting to solve in this whole space, which you typically don't see people solving a lot of these things, because you don't see that sort of scale. And when you operate at this sort of scale, you also see a lot of these edge case, race conditions, and all of these sort of things happening.
Yeah. I mean, it is difficult. I mean, and I think that has led to this whole new kind of industry on observability, right? And it's a big buzzword because now, when you have a couple dozen servers, a couple dozen databases, it's easier to get a handle on things. Maybe you have some scripts, you get some emails now and then or whatever, maybe you throw a monitoring tool out there. Great. But when you've got thousands, how do you find the one or the set of servers that is causing the problem when it could be a dozen, it could be one, it could be out of 1,000, and that becomes really challenging. How are you approaching it? What sort of tooling are you using for monitoring right now to try and find those problems when they occur?
So we have something called as Cosmos here. It is equivalent of Prometheus. We don't have Prometheus yet, but it's a very parallel software. It's a time series database, and possibly there are teams also using Prometheus over here. But the idea is the same, right? We do keep ingesting a lot of these metrics onto the systems. We have a lot of these scheduled rules or alerts, right? Which you configure it with a certain threshold, and the moment one of these parameters basically go above the threshold, alert is sort of made. So that is the alerting part of this thing. And the monitoring part, we have pre-created a lot of these dashboards for all of our customers, so that they don't have to sit and recreate a lot of these things. So we have cluster level metrics, member level metrics, InnoDB level metrics, system metrics, kernel metrics, and a lot of these things already pre-plotted and everything done. So people just have to, they don't have to really do anything. They just have to onboard to the platform, and they get all of these graphing and alerting and everything for free.
Oh, awesome. Well, Vaidy, I want to thank you for coming on today, chatting with me for a while about, your MySQL deployments, and talk to us a little bit about the challenge. And those who are listening, Vaidy's going to be giving a talk where he's going to go a little deeper into how they've overcome some of these issues at Percona Live. So if you can make it May 16th through 18th, that'd be great. But Vaidy, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate having you on today.
Likewise, thanks a lot for having me today.
All right. And for those who are watching, if you like this video, go ahead and like it. Subscribe to the videos, subscribe to the podcasts, and let us know what sort of content you'd like to see, and we'll try and make sure we fill that order. But we appreciate you hanging out with us today, everyone. And until next time, this is the HOSS. Wow, what a great episode that was. We really appreciate you coming and checking it out. We hope that you love open source as much as we do. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe to us on the YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And of course, tune in to next week's episode. We really appreciate you coming and talking open source with us.